Hey everyone, it's Adam from the Army Painter, and today I have a very fun tutorial. We're going to be taking a look at the paints found inside the brand new Zombicide 2nd Edition paint set to commemorate the new edition of the game. And I'm going to show you some speed painting tips using only the paints found inside. But we are going to use some of the products from the Army Painter range. We're going to use the color primers. The color primers are a great way to speed up your time because it applies a base coat and a primer coat in one. So before we get started priming our models, let's head outside. Whenever you're using our color primer sprays, we do recommend that you go to a well-ventilated area. And what's a better well-ventilated area than outdoors? Make sure it's a nice day, it's not rainy or too humid, and you should be safe to spray. Now before you get started, make sure you give that can a really good shake. Very simply and smoothly, we're just going to begin spraying in smooth, even coats across the model. When you're finished spraying, turn the can upside down, activate the trigger until pigment stops coming out. That's a great way to clean the nozzle. So if you haven't guessed by now, we are going to be painting up a bunch of the abominations, the fatties, the walkers, and the runners, the bad guys found inside the Zombicide game and universe. So let's get started. Grab your paints from the box set, your favorite brush, your wet palette, because I sure love to use mine, and let's get right to it. So we have the first of our zombies. This is one of the abomination models. I'm going to get started on him, and I'm just going to pick a color that I want to use. It doesn't really matter here. I think I'm going to start with Depot Green. I'm going to use this just to paint in some of these rags that are hanging off of him. And I'm going to be using the Regiment brush from the Army Painter Wargamer range. Now you can use the brush that comes in the set, that will work just fine. But I have the Regiment brush here because I want to use a slightly thicker bristle brush. This will help to load in a bit more paint. But as you can see, it still holds a very fine tip when we have to get into some of the more detailed areas. So I'm just going to give my Depot Green a good shake. And I'm going to apply a little bit right to my wet palette here. Love using the wet palette, especially when I'm speed painting and batch painting, because it will preserve the paints for a long time. So I've just wet my brush a little bit. I'm going to add some of that water from my cleaning glass to the palette just to thin it down a bit. And I'm just going to load up those bristles with paint. And very simply, I'm going to begin blocking in the areas that I want to be this ugly Depot Green. Once you've applied that first color, you're going to pick another color that you want to paint, and it's very simple. We're just painting by the numbers here. We're just picking out little areas on the model and blocking in different colors. Just very simply, and we're not focusing so much. I mean, we do want to be as tidy as we can, but we're not focusing too much. We want, this is a speed painting tutorial. We're just trying to block in these colors, get a nice smooth base coat, and move on to the next step. One of the things that I really like to do is I like to use a bigger brush, and I like to go ahead and apply a nice smooth but thin down base coat. You don't want to obscure any detail here. That's very important. So it's important that you get the right consistency of the paint when you're mixing it on your palette. I have two lady models here, and I wanted to find a way to pretty them up even though they're kind of ugly zombies. And while the set doesn't have a purple tone in it, it does have Wasted Jeans, which is a nice cobalt blue, and Crusted Sore, which is a nice deep red. I've mixed them together, and I'm going to use this across both of these models, and you can see it gives a very, almost like a muted lavender appearance. I really like how this is going to look. So I'm going to use this on the blazer that this walker is wearing here. And I will also, I'm just going to load up my brush one more time. I'm going to use it to paint in the entire dress that this fatty's wearing. Now, here's a tip for when you are batch painting or speed painting models. Try to work with a limited palette. Pick a few colors that you can use across the models that you're painting. For instance, you grab a blue or even a brown. These are great colors, somewhat neutral colors that you can use to paint in pouches or belt straps or even trousers, shoes, what have you. And that way you're just using that one color and painting it across different models as you're trying to batch paint and speed paint these models. Let me show you right here. What I mean by using a limited palette, you can see I'm repeating some colors like Depot Green here, and I'm using it across the models, trying to form some kind of unity between them, but it's also helping me speed things up. You can see that I use that mix of purple on this model, and again, her larger equivalent there. So I'm just going to showcase that and give you a little example of how I do that. So I'm going to use some skeleton bone here, actually rotten skin, which is a match to skeleton bone from the Army Painter War Paints range. And I'm just going to use it maybe to paint these little pieces of cloth around this model's wrist here, and on our fine fair lady here, I'm probably going to use it to just paint her hair. She is a zombie after all, so she would have kind of worn hair. And another area that I might want to use it is on this model's shirt, to give it almost like a weathered white look. I don't want to paint it pure white because that would just be too bright for a zombie like this. So again, use a limited color palette and your time wisely, because by using these same colors across the models, you can move from one model to the next, and while they're drying, you can move on to the next color and start working back through your little catalog of models. It's a very simple and easy way to save time when you're batch painting or speed painting, whether you're painting an army or the models from a box game like Zombicide. Now, it's important to note that we are speed painting here. We're not worried about all of the fine details. We just want to have a very nice and presentable model for the next time you have your friends over to play Zombicide. So you want to block in some colors, you want to paint within the lines, but you don't want to get too caught up in the details. You'll notice that I'm not painting in any of the eyes, I'm not painting any insignias on these models. I'm just applying some nice smooth base coats, get some really strong coloration, so that when you're standing at the tabletop, it adds a little bit of excitement. It helps you immerse yourselves into the game a little bit more. Now, this wouldn't be a speed painting tutorial if we didn't have some fast forward footage, some time-lapse footage, so I'm just going to dig right in. I'm going to start painting these models. Tune in, I'm going to play some music for you in the background, and enjoy. All right, now our base coating is complete. It's time to really bring out the details on this model. We're not going to be applying any highlights to these zombies or abominations, but we are going to apply a wash. Now the washing step is very important because it's going to help bring out and pick out the details, because a wash is designed to work its way over the raised areas and into the recesses of the model for realistic depth and shading. Now, this set does come with 3 washes: a strong tone wash, which is a dark brown wash, a dark tone wash, which is a black wash, and a flesh tone wash.
Now, I lied a little bit at the beginning. I am going to pull another color from the Army Painter rack that you see behind me. I'm going to pull Military Shader. Now, Military Shader is really great for zombies because it's a little bit brown, it's got a little bit of green in there. It's just going to go perfectly with the zombie flesh and skin and the ragged clothes that they're wearing to give it a moldy, mildewy effect. So let's get right to it. So you can see I have all my zombies, abominations, walkers, runners, and fatties. I've got them all painted in and, fairly cohesive. A lot of grays. I've got those muted purples that we made when I mixed our blue and our red. We've got those ugly greens like that depot green and also moldy clothes in there and also some metallics. So we're just coloring inside the lines. We're finding what we want to paint and we're just applying the paint to it. It's done now. I also went ahead and took some crusted sore. I thinned it down and I gave some bleeding effects from where they were injured in battle, of course. Now, what's really going to take this to the next level is applying a wash. Like I just said, the set does come with dark tone, strong tone, and flesh wash, and any of those would do. Strong tone would probably be the best choice, but I want to use Military Shader because I'm going to be using the strong tone when I paint up the survivors later on. Military Shader is great because it's a little bit brown and a little bit green. It's perfect to give, a moldy, grungy effect to our zombies. Now I'm just going to shake this up. You got to shake your quick shade washes just like you shake your paints. Make sure that those pigments are mixed up with the quick shade wash mixing medium, and I like to use just a standard plastic palette, hard palette. You can find these in a lot of our paint sets, like our starter paint set, our hobby toolkit. I'm just going to apply some to my palette there. I'll thin it down just a little bit with a little bit of water just to loosen it up a little bit. And if you've never used a wash before, and I know some of you that are tuning in here are more board gamers than tabletop gamers, so this might be new to you, painting might be new to you. If you're going to apply a wash for the first time, you're just going to apply this, and I recommend applying it from the top down. And the wash is designed to work its way into the recesses across the model, like so. So you very simply apply it, let gravity do the work its way into the recesses, into the crevices and details, and it really gives the model some definition. It makes the three-dimensionality of the model really pop. Now it is pretty workable. It does dry a little bit, takes a little bit longer to dry than a standard paint. And that's good because after you apply the wash, you might find that you're going to want to go back and move the wash around a bit. So if you see that it begins to pool up too much, you can just go ahead, you can wick some of it away on your palette like so, and then go back, you absorb some of it into the bristles of the brush, and just move it around across the model so that it doesn't pool up, because you don't want this wash to look totally unnatural. I'm just going to show you close up. I've zoomed in the camera a little bit to really give you a feel for how this quick shade wash operates. You can see I'm using a much larger brush. I'm using the monster brush from the Army Painter War Paints range. This is the perfect wash brush, especially for batch painting and speed painting, because it holds quite a bit of the wash in the bristles. And you can see I'm just working that wash around the model from the top down and allowing it, these folds in the dress here are a perfect example of what the wash is supposed to do. It works its way into these folds on the dress, adding natural shadows to the model, just picking out those details very simply. A lot of people say that our quick shade washes are like talent in a bottle, and to some degree it's true. If you can master just applying very simple base tones like we did in the earlier stages of this tutorial, then you can certainly apply a wash and it really presents those details really well and really easily. Okay, and now we're just going to allow this quick shade wash to dry across the models. It should take about 25 to 35 minutes, and depending on how many models you're painting at once, the first model might be dry by the time you're finished. Now, this would be a great time if you did want to apply some highlights. You could go back and reinvigorate some of those base tones with the same color and then apply some more highlights afterwards. But this is not a highlighting tutorial. This is a speed painting tutorial. So for the better part of what we're trying to do, we're done. Now, I would highly recommend applying a coat of our anti-shine matte varnish or Aegis Suit satin varnish over top. Now, what that's going to do, it's a clear varnish. It's going to seal in all of the hard work that you've done and protect those models and protect that paint job, which is great because Zombicide's a game where you're constantly handling the models. You don't want that paint to chip and wear off. So highly recommended that you don't forget that step. All that's left is to base your models. And with board games, it's not traditional that you base and you add any basing materials. You absolutely can. But for these, I'm just going to go ahead and very simply paint them in with some black paint and call it a day. Let's take a look at the final results. Well, I really enjoyed painting up these zombies, these fatties, abominations, the walkers, and the runners with you today. I hope that you learned a thing or two about speed painting, and I hope that you can apply some of these tips and tricks to your next speed painting session so that you can begin enjoying your Zombicide miniatures and your Zombicide game much, much sooner. As always, thank you for tuning in. Remember that the magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as challenging as you'd like it to be, but with the right techniques, you're sure to find some great results. We'll see you next time.